The answer is not a pile. The answer is a pipeline. And the number most financial advisors give you, the one built on a pile, is off by anywhere from $300,000 to $1.4 million, depending on your state, your exit age, and one healthcare cost that gets almost no airtime in mainstream retirement content. In the next 20 minutes, I am going to give you the actual math specific to 2026, so you can calculate your real number today, not a range, not a it depends, an actual monthly target backed by real data. According to Bureau of Labor Statistics consumer expenditure data, the average American household aged 65 and older spends $61,432 per year, about $5,119 per month. That is the baseline. That is not a comfortable retirement. That is average. Average, in this case, is statistically adjacent to struggling. According to the Pension Rights Center, the median individual income for Americans aged 65 or older is $33,310 a year, a figure well below what most people need to cover basic living and healthcare costs. So the system is producing incomes below the spending floor. That is the number one thing I want you to hold in your head for this entire video. Here is the promise. By the end, you will know your specific monthly passive income target, why the standard retirement number you've been handed systematically underestimates it, and the three-part framework I use, built on data, not vibes, to close the gap. I have 10 years running a business surrounded by accountants and fiscal lawyers. I have multiple hundreds of thousands of dollars invested right now. I have skin in this game. And I am going to walk you through the math I actually use, not the math that sounds reassuring. But before the numbers, I need you to adopt one mental model because it will reframe every calculation that follows. Stop thinking about retirement as a pile. Start thinking about it as a pipeline. Every conventional retirement conversation is a pile conversation. How big is your nest egg? Are you on track to hit the 1 million mark? What's your 401k balance? It's all about accumulation. But you do not live in the vault. You live on the drip. You live on what flows through the faucet every single month. And here's the uncomfortable truth. Two people with identical $1 million piles can produce wildly different monthly income, depending on how they built their pipeline. One sleeps fine, the other stress tests their grocery budget in year 3. Same pile, different pipes. The whole retirement industry sells you pile math. I am going to sell you pipeline math. Pipeline math is harder to market, but it is the only kind that actually tells you when you can stop working. Stay with me, because in a few minutes, I'm going to show you a specific timing problem, one that has nothing to do with pile size and everything to do with when you retire, that can turn a mathematically adequate retirement into slow motion failure in the first 5 years. But first, let me show you why the pile number everyone is working toward is almost certainly the wrong number. The foundation. For January 2026, the average retired worker Social Security benefit is $2,071 per month, according to the Social Security Administration. Call it $24,852 per year. Social Security is estimated to replace only about 40% of annual pre-retirement income. So if you were earning $100,000, Social Security hands you about $40,000. You needed the other $60,000 to come from somewhere else. That gap is your pipeline requirement. For a single person targeting comfortable, not extravagant retirement spending at $70,000 per year after Social Security covers $24,000, the portfolio needs to generate $46,000 per year. That is $3,833 per month from your pipeline every month, forever. Now here is where the math starts to break and where most retirement calculators stay suspiciously quiet. You think the spending gap is the problem, but actually it's a specific hidden cost that blows up the gap before the calculator even gets to the first withdrawal. Healthcare. Health insurance costs an average of $1,691 per month at age 62 and $1,766 per month at age 64, according to 2026 Value Penguin Marketplace analysis, based on a full price silver plan. That is not a typo. That is roughly what you pay in your last years before Medicare kicks in, if you retire before 65 and your income is above the subsidy threshold. The enhanced premium tax credits that held down ACA costs from 2021 through 2025 expired at the end of 2025 and were not renewed for 2026. The subsidy cliff is back. If your 2026 household income is above 400% of the federal poverty level, roughly $62,600, for a single person, you no longer qualify for premium tax credits. Think about what that means structurally. You retire early, you draw from your portfolio to live. That portfolio income counts as taxable income in most cases. And if it pushes you above $62,600, you pay full price for health insurance, which runs nearly $21,000 per year at age 64 per person. For the 3 years from age 62 through 64, you could pay a total of $62,340 for health insurance after monthly bills are added together. That is $62,000 of pipeline capacity consumed before you buy a single prescription. And here is where the pipeline metaphor starts to pay for itself. You size your pipe to handle your lifestyle gap, $46,000 per year. You did not size it for the healthcare surge at the beginning. The pipe is too narrow for the pressure required, and the first 3 years of retirement blow it out before the system ever reaches steady state. Even after 65, when Medicare kicks in, the costs do not disappear. Adding a Part D prescription drug plan at roughly $35 per month and a Medigap supplement at $150 to $220 per month brings a common original Medicare total to roughly $388 to $458 per month, or $4,656 to $5,496 annually. And over your entire retirement, Fidelity's 2025 retiree healthcare cost estimate puts the average 65-year-old couple at needing about $330,000 to cover medical expenses not paid by Medicare. To have a 90% chance of meeting their healthcare spending needs in retirement, according to a 2026 EBRI report, a man will need to have saved $212,000, and a woman will need to have saved $252,000. These numbers are not in your 401k projection. They live in footnotes of reports nobody reads. I read them. It's the job. By the way, hit subscribe if you like the content, otherwise YouTube's algorithm may never show you my videos again. So let's update the true pipeline width you need. Comfortable lifestyle gap after Social Security, $3,400 to $4,700 per month. Healthcare gap for pre-Medicare years, add $1,400 to $1,750 per month for 3 years. Healthcare inflation. Healthcare costs for retirees have historically increased at 5 to 7% per year, significantly faster than general CPI inflation of 2 to 3%, which means the pipe you size for today will need to be wider in 10 years just to buy the same level of medical care. The honest monthly passive income target for someone retiring before 65 in a median cost state, $5,500 to $7,500 per month, all in, not a round number. A range calculated from actual spending data, actual insurance rates, and actual inflation curves for the costs retirees actually face. Now let me give you the conversion formula. Monthly passive income target to portfolio size. Here is the part that never makes it into a retirement calculator. Knowing the target and building a system around it are two completely different things. I know people who can recite the 4% rule but have never stress tested their plan against a forced early exit, a bad sequence of returns, or the insurance gap. The numbers give you the destination. The system is what gets you there without blowing a tire. I spent the better part of a year going through 50 years of actual retirement data, not Monte Carlo simulations, not back tests with hindsight bias, but real portfolio histories and real failure cases. And I distilled it into a framework I call the Exit Code. It's a digital book, 8 chapters, no filler, built entirely on data. 3 things in it connect directly to what we're doing right now. The first, the $14,000 invisible bill. That is the insurance gap for people retiring between 62 and 65. Calculated for post-2025 ACA structures. Almost no pre-retirement planning conversation prices this correctly. The second, the 4% trap. Not that 4% is wrong, but that using it as a fixed, rigid number without a dynamic withdrawal adjustment mechanism is where sequence of returns risk bites hardest. The third, the Social Security bridge strategy, how to delay claiming until age 70 without depleting the portfolio in the gap years, which turns out to be one of the highest return moves in retirement finance, and one of the most behaviorally difficult. You can get it through the link in the description. It costs less than 1 dinner out. Every year you wait on this, math compounds against you, and that is not a sales line. It is the literal mechanics of compound interest working in reverse. Now, back to the pipeline. The 4% rule. Bengen is the financial planner who introduced the famous 4% rule in the Journal of Financial Planning in 1994. He found that retirees could count on their retirement savings lasting at least 3 decades if they started by withdrawing 4% of their money and then increased the dollar amount they're withdrawing each year to keep up with inflation. That became gospel. The retirement industry built every calculator, every projection, every you're on track conversation around it for 30 years. Here's what the research says right now in 2026. In their annual State of Retirement Income Report from December 2025, Morningstar raised their recommended safe withdrawal rate to 3.9% for 2026. Up from 3.7% in 2024. The increase reflects higher bond yields, 4 to 5% on treasuries, and reasonable equity valuations. For a $1 million portfolio, the Morningstar safe withdrawal rate of 3.9% provides $39,000 per year in inflation-adjusted income over a 30-year retirement with a 90% success probability. Meanwhile, Bengen himself has since revised the figure upward, most recently suggesting 4.7% as the worst-case historical safe withdrawal rate. He told CNBC in 2025 that retirees who stick with 4% are likely cheating themselves a little bit of the retirement they earned. So you've got Morningstar at 3.9 and Bengen at 4.7. The gap between them on a $1 million portfolio is $8,000 per year. On $2 million, $16,000 per year. These are not rounding errors. These are meaningful differences in pipeline width that compound over a 30-year retirement. But here is the number that nobody is talking about at the cocktail party. All of this, 3.9, 4, 4.7, is calibrated for a 30-year retirement. Retire at 65, die at 95, 30 years, fine. For early retirees with 40 to 50 plus year horizons, 3 to 3.5% remain safer. For a 40-year retirement, retiring at age 50 to 55, research suggests a safe withdrawal rate of 3.2 to 5 to 3.5%. This matters enormously. The difference between 4% and 3.2 to 5% on a $2 million portfolio is $15,000 per year. On $3 million, $22,500 per year. That is money your pipe does not carry. That is pipeline width you do not have. And your pile did not shrink. Nothing changed except the math you used to size the pipe. Here is the you think X is the problem, but actually Y is the problem moment of this video. You think the problem is accumulation, getting to the pile, hitting the number. But the problem, the one that actually determines whether your retirement holds, is pipeline sizing. What withdrawal rate you apply, how you handle the healthcare gap, how you buffer against sequence risk. Two people with identical piles, one of whom sized the pipeline correctly, and one of whom used a 30-year rule on a 45-year retirement, produce fundamentally different outcomes. The pile is visible and measurable. The pipeline is where all the hidden mistakes live. Let me give you the sequence of return story in concrete terms, because this is the mechanism behind why the pipeline can fail even when the math looks fine on paper. In 2000 and 2001, the S&P 500 lost 10.1% and 13%, respectively. If you had retired into that bear market while taking $50,000 a year from a $1 million portfolio, you'd have had $687,927 left at the beginning of 2002. In 2 years, between market losses and withdrawals, you'd lost over $300,000 of base capital. The portfolio was now $312,000 smaller than you started, and the money you'd actually spent on living expenses was only $100,000. The other $212,000 was market loss, realized in the worst possible window right at the beginning, when the portfolio was at its largest and the damage to compounding was maximum. The long-term averaging out of the stock market doesn't help over a short period, like 5 to 10 years, during which sequence of return risk may ruin the rest of your retirement. If you get a bad sequence of returns at the beginning, you may run out of money later, and your planned safe withdrawal rate is no longer safe. Morningstar's 2025 research found that retirees who experienced poor returns in the first 5 years and did not adjust their spending were far more likely to go broke. Not eventually poor returns. First 5 years poor returns. The window matters more than the magnitude. In pipeline terms, pressure loss at the source is catastrophic. A leak at the beginning of the pipe drains the system before pressure ever stabilizes. A leak 10 years in, when the system has been running at steady state, is recoverable. Same leak, different timing, completely different outcome. The practical fix is not complicated. A 1 to 2 year cash cushion in low-risk assets money market, short-term treasuries at the point of retirement means you are never forced to sell equity in a down year to cover expenses. You live off the cushion. The portfolio recovers. You refill the cushion in good years. It is not exciting. It is the difference between surviving a bad sequence and being permanently impaired by one. Now I want to walk you through a real case, specific numbers. Marcus is 47 years old. He earns $120,000 per year, lives in Texas. Current investable assets, $320,000. Target retirement, age 58. Monthly expenses in retirement, $7,000. Comfortable, not extravagant. $7,000 per month is $84,000 per year. Marcus is 58, so he has 7 years until Medicare. During that window, health insurance in Texas at his age will run him approximately $15,000 to $18,000 per year at full price. Let's call it $16,000, which is actually conservative given the trajectory of premiums. So his all-in spending for years 1 through 7 is $100,000 per year. Social Security at 58 is zero. He won't claim it. His pipeline needs to carry $100,000 annually from the portfolio alone for 7 years before anything else kicks in. For a 40-year retirement beginning at 58, the research-supported withdrawal rate is 3.25 to 3.5%. Using 3.4 to be moderately generous, 100,000 divided by 0.034 equals a required portfolio of $2,940,000. Marcus has 320,000 today, 11 years to accumulate. At 7% annual returns with consistent contributions, getting from 320,000 to 2,940,000 requires contributing roughly 114,000 per year. That is 95% of his pre-tax income. Not happening. But here is what the math is actually telling Marcus, and this is where pipeline thinking is useful rather than discouraging. He has 3 levers, and none of them require earning more money. Lever 1, timeline. Work until 62, not 58. 4 more years of contributions plus 4 more years of compounding. Healthcare gap shrinks from 7 years to 3. Required portfolio at 62 drops substantially because Social Security becomes claimable without the maximum penalty. Lever 2, fee reduction. If Marcus moves from an advisor-managed account at 1% to a low-cost total market index fund at 0.05%, a 1% fee on a $1 million portfolio costs over $500,000 over 30 years. When you account for the compounding effect of those fees being pulled from your investments each year. On Marcus's projected trajectory, the fee difference alone adds between $300,000 and $500,000 to his retirement portfolio by the time he exits. Lever 3, Social Security timing. Workers can file for the retirement benefit as early as 62, but the trade-off is a roughly 30% reduction in their monthly checks compared with waiting until full retirement age. Every year Marcus delays claiming past 62 adds roughly 8% per year to his lifetime monthly benefit. Waiting until 67 instead of claiming at 62 increases his monthly check by approximately 75%. The bridge from 62 to 67 is funded by the portfolio. But the lifetime math of waiting is almost always superior unless he is in poor health. Running those 3 levers together, at 62, with consistent contributions and low-cost investing, Marcus realistically reaches a portfolio of $1,700,000. That is not enough. At 3.4% for full $100,000 per year withdrawal, he'd be at nearly 6%. So in the first 2 to 3 years, he runs a modest consulting arrangement, $25,000 to $30,000 per year, not because the plan failed, but because it lowers his withdrawal to a safe rate while the portfolio continues compounding. By 65, Medicare eliminates the insurance burden. By 67, Social Security covers $28,000 per year. His effective withdrawal rate on the remaining portfolio drops to well below 4%. The pipeline is now fully pressurized and sustainable. Marcus's plan works not because the math is perfect, but because he stress-tested the 62 exit, not the pencil-straight 65 scenario. Here is the subplot that has been quietly threading through this video, and it matters more than any other single data point. More than half of workers, 58%, retire earlier than they planned, usually due to unforeseen circumstances, according to research from the Transamerica Center for Retirement Studies. The median age, they call it quits, is 62, 3 years shy of the traditional retirement age of 65. The Employee Benefit Research Institute and Greenwall Research found that 46% of Americans who retired last year left the workforce earlier than they originally planned. The forces behind those early exits tell a story that should concern anyone who assumes they will get to choose when their career ends. Unplanned health conditions and corporate restructuring were the 2 largest forces pushing workers out of their careers ahead of schedule, according to the 2026 EBRI survey. Circumstances entirely outside the individual worker's control were responsible for 76% of all unplanned early retirements in 2025. According to the 2025 EBRI Retirement Confidence Survey, the median expected retirement age among workers is 65. The median actual retirement age among retirees is 62. That 3-year gap has persisted for decades across multiple surveys. Think about what that means structurally. The average American's retirement plan is built around a 65 or 67 exit, the one that pencils out. The average American's actual exit is 62. They get 3 extra years of expenses that they didn't plan for, 3 fewer years of savings that they were counting on, and they show up at the door of Medicare eligibility 3 years early with no coverage, a smaller portfolio, and Social Security they may have to claim early to close the gap. In the 2025 EBRI survey, 75% of workers said they plan to work for pay in retirement. Only 29% of retirees reported actually doing so. The people who plan to work part-time in retirement, who built that income into the retirement plan, 71% of them discovered that the job market for 63-year-olds in their field is not what they expected. The plan had a revenue assumption that reality did not honor. The pipeline for this person, call them Dave, call them any name, this is the statistical majority. The pipeline was sized for the wrong scenario. It was sized for best case, and best case in retirement planning is the least useful scenario to optimize for. Here is where I land on it. The pipeline needs to be built for the 62 exit, even if you plan to work until 65. If the plan survives a 62 scenario, you have margin. If it only survives a 67 scenario, you have optimism. Now, let me drop the final number that should make you rethink every "you're on track" conversation you've ever had. According to a Federal Reserve survey, retirement savings peak at a median of $200,000 for those aged 65 to 74, $200,000. At 3.9% withdrawal, that generates $7,800 per year, $650 per month from the portfolio. Social Security provides an average monthly benefit of $1,976 as of January 2025. Total, $2,626 per month for the median American retiree with savings. Average annual expenditures for households aged 65 and older are $61,432 per year. That is $5,119 per month in expenses versus $2,600 per month in income. The median American retiree is running a structural monthly deficit of roughly $2,500. That is not a worst-case scenario. That is the median, the mathematical middle of American retirement. Here's the moment that always lands when I explain this in person. Someone sits across from me, listens to these numbers, and says, "Okay, so I'm just behind." And I say, "No, you're building the wrong size pipe for a problem you haven't fully calculated yet. The math is not scary. The math is actually the most clarifying thing you can do. Because once you know your real number, once you know the actual width of pipe you need, every financial decision becomes simple. Does this action widen my pipe or not? Roth conversion this year, pipe analysis. Low-cost fund versus managed fund, pipe analysis. Claim Social Security at 62 versus 67, pipe analysis with a bridge strategy. Now, a brief comedic detour, because the tension in this room is getting thick, and I always find that helps. There's a specific conversation that has played out in thousands of financial advisor offices across this country for 30 years. And it goes like this. Client, am I on track? Advisor, depends on your goals. Client, my goal is to retire. Advisor, right. So at what age? Client, 65. Advisor, great. And what income level? Client, enough. And then a pie chart appears and nobody learns anything. I am not making fun of the advisor. The advisor is answering the question the client is asking. The problem is the client is asking a pile question when they should be asking a pipeline question. Also, your 401k statement says you are up 14% this year. What it does not say is that the S&P 500 was up 16%. Your expense ratio is 0.8 to 7%. Your advisory fee is 1%, and your net gain after fees was closer to 12%. That is 4 percentage points of structural drag on every year of compounding you will ever do in that account. Over 30 years, a seemingly small 1% difference in annual fees can reduce your final portfolio value by 20 to 30%. The statement does not mention this. The statement shows you total balance and a green number. The statement is a marketing document dressed as a financial report. Back to the final component of pipeline construction that nobody finds exciting until they run the numbers. Fee drag is the silent narrower of pipes, and it compounds against you with the same merciless efficiency as compounding works for you when you invest. Consider two identical $1 million portfolios earning 7% annually. The difference in portfolio value after 20 years between a zero fee account and a 1% fee account is approximately $663,000. That is the true cost of the 1% fee. Not $200,000 in fees paid, but $663,000 when you include the lost compounding. A 1% annual fee on a $2 million portfolio earning 7% could cost you more than $375,000 over 10 years. In a decade, not in a lifetime. In 10 years, the fee compounds, your portfolio grows, the fee grows with it. And each dollar that leaves as a fee is a dollar that can no longer compound at 7% for the remaining horizon. A 1% difference in fees could lead to a 240% difference in returns over 30 years. That is a pipeline that is less than half the diameter it should be, caused entirely by a fee you sign at onboarding and never thought about again. Now, to be fair, some advisors produce genuine value. Tax efficiency, estate planning, behavioral coaching, Social Security optimization. A 1% fee may be reasonable if you get comprehensive financial planning, meaning retirement projections, tax strategy including Roth conversions and tax loss harvesting, insurance review, and estate planning. The question to ask is whether you are getting those services in exchange for that fee, or whether you are paying 1% per year for a rebalancing conversation and a quarterly report, because a robo-advisor does basic portfolio management for 0.2 to 5% or less. The lazy portfolio, broad market index fund, low expense ratio, automatic rebalancing, tax advantage wrapper is not a strategy for people who cannot figure out anything better. It is a baseline that most active strategies fail to beat over 30 years, net of fees. I say this having spent years watching accountants and lawyers analyze sophisticated investment products for clients and watching the low-cost index position quietly outperform over every meaningful horizon. All right, bringing it home. The 3 practical takeaways specific to this topic, not generic. Number 1, start with a monthly pipeline number, not the pile. Take your actual expected monthly spending in retirement. Add healthcare as a hard dollar figure based on your age, not a footnote, a number. At 62 to 65, that number is over $16,000 per year in premiums alone. Divide the annual gap between your spending and your Social Security by your appropriate withdrawal rate, 3.9%. If you retire at 65 or later, 3.2 to 5% if you retire at 50 or 55. That gives you your portfolio target. Run that calculation today. Number 2, build your plan around the 62 exit, not the 65 or 67 exit. A separate EBRI study of 3,600 retirees aged 62 to 75 found that 58% had retired earlier than planned. That is not a bad outcome. That is the default outcome. If your financial plan only holds if you work until 67, you do not have a retirement plan. You have a one scenario plan. Take your current model and run the numbers as if your income stops at 62. Model the Social Security reduction. Model the healthcare gap. Model the smaller pile. If the plan survives intact, you have margin. If it collapses, you know exactly where to short up before life does it for you. Number 3, run a fee audit on every account you own this month. Add up every expense ratio in every fund. Add the advisory fee if you have one. Add fund expense ratios on top of that. Additional expenses like underlying investment costs, platform fees, and trading charges bring the average all-in cost to 1.6 to 5% for many investors. Calculate what that total fee costs you. At 7% returns over 20 years. If you started at $200,000 today and paid 1.6 to 5% in total annual cost versus 0.05%, the difference in ending balance over 20 years at 7% is over $150,000. That is a pipe you built with a leak already drilled into it. The fix is boring and takes 30 minutes online. Low-cost index funds, broad diversification, hold for 30 years. Do not look at it every day. The pipeline you size today, calibrated for the real number, stress-tested for the early exit, running at low fee drag is the difference between choosing when you stop working and having the choice made for you. Dave, the composite of the most common American retirement outcome, didn't have a bad plan. Dave had an optimistic one. He optimized for the scenario that required everything to go right. The correct approach is to size the pipe for the scenario where things go wrong on schedule, because per the data, they do. The subplot resolves like this. Dave, forced out at 62, survives. He is okay. He is not destitute. But he is constrained by a plan that wasn't designed for the reality it encountered. He lives on less than he intended. He does not travel the way he imagined. He watches the portfolio more anxiously than is comfortable. None of this is a catastrophe. All of it was preventable with a different set of calculations at 47. The math is not the scary part of retirement planning. The math is the easy part. The hard part is believing that the uncomfortable number, the wider pipe target, the earlier exit stress test, the honest healthcare figure is more useful than the comfortable one. It always is. Lazy investing built more fortune than crypto memes. And the final line, delivered with full amused disappointment. The retirement industry's favorite product has always been a comfortable feeling of being on track. It is very affordably priced and almost entirely uncorrelated with whether you actually are